It's the Kyle Hyman Show on Redeemer Radio.
This is Kyle Hyman, and with us this morning is Michael Kurek, here to talk about The Sound of Beauty, a classical composer on music in the spiritual life. I'm so excited for this. Thanks for being here, Michael.
Good morning.
Who's your favorite composer?
Well, it varies from day to day, but as far as a kind of role model for my own music, I admire different things in different composers. For example, in Brahms's music, the way he tells a story and transports you to someplace by the end of the movement, so that you've been taken on the journey.
How much are you actually just sitting down and listening to songs undistracted versus having it on in the background? Do you like intentionally sit down and just appreciate the music?
Yeah, and it's kind of a lost art, and it's something I talk about in the book. There are different types of listeners, but today it's almost an epidemic that we multitask everything.
Uh-huh.
And, if you're going to read a long novel, or if you're going to listen to a long piece of instrumental music, for example, like a symphony, if you don't give it your full attention, then you're shortchanging yourself. But it's very hard, but the temptation is too great to pick up to play solitaire on the computer screen while you're listening.
Uh-huh.
But really, I think this soundbite world and the technology in a way is robbing us of something, of maybe our ability to engage things in a deep way. And that in turn robs us maybe of a contemplative spirit, which translates into prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And, you don't want to be playing solitaire while you're praying, the rosary or something, so to focus is a spiritual skill. So we've got to be very careful about that, I think.
I think that's an interesting perspective of thinking of listening to music as a form of prayer. And how has maybe faith had an impact on your work as a composer?
Yeah, very much so, because my whole set of standards, my mission statement for composing has changed radically. I'm a revert. I came back into the church about 11 years ago.
Okay.
And, in my world of classical music, the norm is avant-garde music that is atonal, or for those who are not familiar with those terms, picture a cat walking on the piano keys, something that sounds rather random. And that's kind of what I'm expected to write, but I go against the grain and write melodies and beauty. And that's why people like my music. I think most normal people do, because I have a sense of truth, goodness, and beauty that I strive for in my work.
So one of the things that you do here is kind of break down the science of music, which I just find fascinating. So how would you describe music? What is music? What counts as music as opposed to just sound or noise?
Sound. There is a natural music that God made, the birds calling and things like that. But we're so overwhelmed by music everywhere, in the grocery store, when we're on hold on the phone, and we're bombarded by it, and then we just tune out everything, and that's a shame. Because God made music to draw us, to remind us of Himself as a gift of love and of beauty that draws us closer to Him, as I said, in a contemplative kind of way. And it's a shame when it becomes a distraction instead. But a lot of people, music is a mysterious thing because it's invisible, and people don't necessarily think about it because it's just this sound that floats in and then floats out, and it's sort of, what is it? What was it? And yet it has its power to move us, to move our emotions, even bring us to tears. But the first thing I wanted to establish in the book is that music is a physical creation. It's not invisible in the way angels are, that is purely spiritual. It consists of atoms, in the gases of the air being pushed into waves, sound waves. When you pluck a string or something, it vibrates, and that sets the air into motion, and that gets to your eardrums. And, so it is just like a tree or a sunset or anything God made. It's a physical part of God's natural creation, and we have to praise him for that, first of all.
So on a spectrum between science and art, where would you put music?
Oh, yeah. That's a great question. Because it incorporates both. I mean, on a spectrum of science and art, where would you put a sunset? The sunset is beautiful, and God hardwired us, I say in the book, I think, to recognize beauty, and it's one of the things in Romans chapter 1 that St. Paul says gives us no excuse to deny the existence of God, is that we have this creation. And it's not just because the creation is ordered and scientific, but it's because it's beautiful that we respond in faith, I think. And he doesn't say, I don't know that he goes into the specificity. So music is, as science, it's part of the creation, but as art, it's also full of beauty, and the two are kind of inseparable in a way.
We're talking with Michael Kurek. The book is The Sound of Beauty, a classical composer on music in the spiritual life. And you have an appendix in the back, which has this really neat virtue rating for songs, specifically to do this with a classroom or something like that. I think this is really neat. And it breaks down like the idea of, are these lyrics virtuous? And I think a lot of times when we think about the good or the bad of a song, we just think about the lyrics. Mm-hmm. How can we find, or can we find, evil versus virtual aspects in instrumental music?
That's a great question. Also, first, let me just say about the virtue rating system. My wife is a Catholic school music teacher, and we worked this out together, and she's been using it in the classroom for years, and it really gives the kids an awareness of exactly which of the virtues are in the lyrics of a song, and they do a rating system, and they score points for songs that they're listening to. And in the book, we have a song by Taylor Swift, and the points are there. And that particular song is sort of medium on the scale. But so it's very helpful for parents to get this, and it also helps parents to negotiate their whole thing of their kids playing an instrument and dealing with ego and jealousy, and so it's a real handbook for parents also, this book. But as far as your question, I think that one of the things for me that indicates a Christian worldview is that the music does tell a story, and it's going somewhere. It has a purpose. If you listen to a lot of modern music, it sounds random and purposeless and aimless, just like a lot of our society seems to be floundering in now. So to have music that really takes you on a journey, and one way to do that is melody. If you get rid of melody in classical music, you really handicap yourself at trying to tell a narrative. Mm-hmm. So that's why my music is very melodic.
So that melody, is it always a positive thing, or is there some melodies that would be actually we shouldn't be listening to because it would have some kind of negative influence on us?
Well, that's a great question too, and I do deal with it in the book. That St. Ignatius of Loyola gave us the rules for the discernment of spirits, and it applies so well because, for example, I knew a woman who said she could not listen to the music of Tchaikovsky because it had too many climaxes, and it made her nervous and upset. So she had to listen to Bach. And then other people love Tchaikovsky, and so the church doesn't really dictate to us what to listen to outside of Mass. And it does talk about Mass very specifically, but in our own private lives, we have to exercise our prudential judgment and say, how did that make me feel in my spirit after? Did it make me agitated and upset? Or maybe it had agitation, but it ended on a positive note. So overall, I feel that was a thrilling piece of music. But music that's supposed to be happy, like disco club music, you go and you party and you come away and maybe you just feel empty, And so even though it was happy music, you feel sad. So it's very important to use, the Holy Spirit and discernment that God gives us as Catholics to decide for ourselves what our own playlist is. And the other point I make in the book is you should pick your own playlist. Don't let some disc jockey, dictate to you what to listen to. Which I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that on the radio. But choose wisely, which kind of spiritual musical nourishment to put into your own soul, and do mix in some instrumental music, because that's a balanced diet. Some people only listen to vocal songs, and I think that another side of the brain is activated, a more contemplative and cerebral kind of side of the brain is activated by instrumental music. So it's good to add some of that in too. Yeah. And there are plenty. One of the things I put in the book is a lot of people ask me, the older people, they say, I've always wanted to listen to classical music, but I don't know where to begin, and I can't pronounce the names. I put on the radio, and it's boring. And I said, well, do you like the Nutcracker at Tchaikovsky at Christmas time? Oh, yeah, that's beautiful. Well, in this book, I'm giving you a list of 20 pieces that sound just as beautiful as the Nutcracker, with great melodies and tunes and emotion, and you're going to love it. And it's a beginner's playlist for classical music. And that's in an appendix also.
Yeah, the appendix are really cool in this book, so people should check it out for that alone, if nothing else. But also, just the way you break down music and its role in liturgy and worship, but then outside of that as well. What suggestions would you have for us if we are going to sit down and listen to these pieces? What should we be listening for? What should we be thinking about? How could that actually translate into, like you were saying, a form of prayer?
Well, that's great. He who sings prays twice, and he who listens prays once, maybe.
Okay, I'll take it.
But I think avoid distraction and focus, just on I think that you have to trust that God speaks to us through beauty, and he will move your heart, for example, toward emotion, maybe toward compassion. If there's a really beautiful melody, it heighten your sense of compassion and other good things. So it's different for every person and every piece of music. But, if you pick the right piece of music that really moves you, I think everybody probably has heard something like that already, and they know what I'm talking about. And that's just a kind of way of quieting your mind also and getting in a contemplative place. Mm-hmm. Although there is exciting music too, and that's beautiful too. But I trust in the fact that God gave us this sense of beauty. No one has to prove to anyone that a sunset is beautiful. You can't prove it in a court of law, and yet we all know that a sunset is beautiful. Yeah, because we're wired that way to know it, and we also recognize when a piece of music is beautiful, or other things like if you see a dance of Fred Astaire, so elegant on an old movie. Everybody knows that's beautiful. I don't know that anybody that doesn't recognize that. So trust in that and use your own kind of conscience and discernment of how it makes you feel.
All right. Well, again, the book is called The Sound of Beauty, a classical composer on music in the spiritual life. It's available from Ignatius Press. You can find it online. Also, you can check out Michael Kurek's website, which is just michaelkurek.com, Kurek. Thank you so much, Michael, for sharing a little bit about music with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.